I'd like to call the meeting of the Matthews Board of Commissioners to order, July 8th, 2019. The first item is our safety minute that we typically do. If we have to evacuate the building, we would go out these back doors. There's a stairwell to the right. You go down and out the front door of the building, and please move away from the building. You can also turn to your left. There's a back stairwell. We'll take you into the back parking lot. If you'll move to the back part of the parking lot, and please be careful for any emergency vehicles. There's a defibrillator to the right of the reception's desk out front. If we need to get that, it's hanging on the wall, clearly marked. And if you have any packages or anything with you, please put those under your chair, either in front of you or underneath you, so that if we do have to evacuate, people who are in the row can get out and move out of the room. With that, I'll turn to our town attorney, Mr. Buckley, for the invocation.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's take a moment this evening to recognize our founding fathers and the patriots who provided us with an opportunity to create a free and independent nation, which we enjoy today. So let's just take a moment of silence in recognition of those founding fathers. Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have items to be added to the agenda. I'll turn to the manager.
Mr. Mayor, no items to be added to the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Next item is public comment. We did not have anyone sign up for public comment. Next, I'll ask Jay Kemp to recognize the planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matthews Planning Board here on the front row, Carrie Lamson, Jana Reeve, Natasha Edwards, Pastor Larry Whitley. On the second row, Jonathan Clayton, Mike Rowan, and our chair, David Weiser.
Thank you. Next item is recess the regular meeting for a public hearing. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The town board is now in public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Board. The first item, 8A, is a special assessment for Acacia Street, Cockenwoods Lane, Jerry Lane, and Lightwood Drive, all of which are located in the Streamside subdivision. So what we will do on this evening, is we're waiting for Mr. O'Neill to get queued up here. C.J. O'Neill will give us a overview of the process and what has gone on with the streets over the past several months. Next, we will also hear from C.J. in addition our town attorney on what the town can and cannot do regarding these roads, which I will say are private roads at this point and have not been accepted into the town. Next, we'll have our public hearing for anyone who would like to speak to this issue. And I want to be clear when we get this done, this is a petition process, and over 50% of the people need to sign the petition in order for this to move forward as a special assessment. We will, after the public hearing, give the individuals who live in the neighborhood the opportunity, if they sign the petition, to come to the clerk and get a form allowing them to withdraw their name from the petition. So if anyone's changed their mind, we've already had one individual do that. We just want to make sure that everyone understands and has the opportunity before we move forward with this assessment. So, Mr. O'Neill?
Thank you, Mayor and board members. As you're aware, the Streamside subdivision is going through a special assessment process. This started back somewhere around 2008 when the development started. The builder subdivided it and started adding the infrastructure. Around 2012, we noticed that no progress had been made in a while. We started meeting with him to see where he was and what he was going to do to bring them up to our standards so that we could take over the road. In 2014, is this not? Sorry, can everybody hear me all right? Okay. In 2014, no further progress had been made, and we finally ended up pulling the developer's bond. At that time, and it was a cash bond, by the way. At that time, I think it had been lowered once from the original bond amount. North Carolina state law allows for developers to come back and ask for a reduction in their bond, at which time we have to go back and reevaluate what is left in the development, and we can only set the bond for that amount. And so that's what the bond was set for. January 2019, I met out with the residents. They were nice enough to meet me out in the subdivision and talk about where we were, what happened, and how to move forward. Based on that conversation, April 6th, the residents petitioned the board to complete the repairs and to assess the property owners in accordance with NCGS Chapter 160A, Article 10. May 13th, the board adopted the preliminary assessment resolution and set the public hearing date for June 10th. June 10th, after we had received bids from the resurfacing program due to their high cost, the board elected to delay the resolution to proceed so that the homeowners had a chance to figure out where we were and how they wanted to move forward, or if they wanted to move forward. During that time, I went and rebid that, changed the contract, put a little bit more of the risk onto the town, also changed the method of work to make it more efficient for the contractor. That resulted in lower bids, roughly $500,000 cheaper. However, for the residents, the estimate per lot was still a little bit over double what the original estimate was. The original estimate was $2,500 per lot. With the newest bids, it comes up to roughly $5,200 per lot. There we go. Didn't have to remember that. So some things to remember: this is still an estimate, and there are things that can still affect the final assessment. One thing, since we took the risk onto us, we're going to have to deal with the fluctuation of asphalt prices. That's in the contract now. So if the asphalt prices go up significantly between now and when the process is done in that neighborhood, that can change the price. Or if it goes down, it can change the price. As part of the contract, though, I asked them to get that their neighborhood done first, so that the fluctuation would be minimized. The amount of cement that's used in the mix is based on a mix design that was actually just completed today. Based on what I'm seeing, that should lower the price a little bit, not significantly, but a little bit. Administrative costs, town attorney's fees, and other costs related to the assessment can be added in if the board so chooses. We're looking at ways to minimize the cost to the neighborhood, possibly doing some of the repairs in-house. I just finished getting estimates back for almost everything. It looks like we can save roughly $10,000 off the contracted price by doing the repairs in-house versus contracting them out. So some areas of concern that were raised by the residents: one, obviously the increase in price over the estimate. Two, Matthews didn't do more to protect the citizens. Three, the developer is able to sell lots even even though he reneged on his development. For the builders, a builder is proposing homes that don't meet the HOA's covenants and restrictions. And 5, that some properties may not be assessed. So I'll go through these one at a time. The increase in price over estimate, the construction market has become very competitive. Price of labor, price of asphalt, price of cement have all gone up. We received 3 bids from 3 good contractors, and they were within 15% of each other. So I don't think that this is a case of a poor project or anything else that we could have foreseen. I'll have to say, in the, I guess how many years, 13 years I've been here, as far as I know, this is the first contract that I've bid out for resurfacing that's been over my estimate. So Matthews did not do more to protect its citizens. We're pretty much handcuffed on what we can and can't do. There's a law that was enacted by the legislature a couple years ago saying that when the developer requests it, the town must lower the bond amount to what is left for them to do. So if all that's left them to do is that final surface and to point up the catch basins, that's all we can put in that estimate. It doesn't allow for additional repairs or anything else that may come up over time. 3, if the developer is able to sell lots, we don't have any ability to restrict that. Once the assessment is done, we can assess that to all the lots, or will be assessed to all the lots, in which case if the developer at that time wants to sell a lot, there will be a lien on the lot for the amount that's owed. And Charlie, please jump in if I'm getting any of this wrong. Number 4, the builders proposing homes that don't meet the HOA's covenants and restrictions. That's a legal agreement between property owners, and the town plays no part in that. We can't enforce that at all. If you guys want to, you can go back through the court system to get, I can't think what you call it, recompense or
To enforce the contract.
thank you, to enforce the contract. 5, that some properties will not be assessed. That's not correct. It's either all or nothing. It's either everybody in every lot is assessed equally, or the assessment doesn't go forward and none of the lots are assessed. And hopefully I got all of them. If not, please come forward and let me know. So right now I see 3 ways of moving forward. 1, to proceed with the assessment. I received, let me go down and check, as of as of 5 o'clock, I had received 8 responses on whether to move forward or not. 7 of them were in favor of moving forward, and 1, who is a person who had asked to have their name taken off the petition, was the one that was not in favor. 2, proceed with an assessment at a lesser percentage. That is an option. We've had 3 special assessments to this point. So far, all of them have been at 100%. One thing that was pointed out to me, though, that all 3 of those were really their own neighborhoods without connecting roads, which this one is a little bit different. It does have connecting roads to other subdivisions. And 3, not to proceed with the assessment. With that, I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Any questions for CJ? Chris?
Yeah. If we have to have 100% to proceed, correct? So you've already got 1 that's withdrawn.
So you just have to have a majority of the
Majority.
properties or of the lots.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you said 100% there. So what happens if you only have majority? Do all of them still get assessed equal amounts?
Yeah, I think your microphone's, sorry.
Equal amounts?
Yes, so even if only 51% just elect to move forward and the board elects to move forward, they will still all be assessed.
Okay, so it's not a case of you can take those and divvy them up and put them into the others who are in favor of it. It's got to be all or none then.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for CJ? Mr. Miller?
Thank you. CJ, what's the name of the developer?
I should know this. Can someone help me out?
I didn't find it in the notes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure it's either in the memo I just wrote or the
Simmons
previous.
and Bear. Simmons and Bear.
Thank you, Simmons and
you.
Bear.
I'm curious,
LLC.
I'd be curious to see if they have any other projects nearby in the
There-
Mecklenburg County area. And without opining too much, do the owners of the vacant lots have to share in the assessment payments as well?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Higdon?
CJ, can you expound a little bit on the connecting streets nature, why that sets this assessment apart from others we've had?
So all the other neighborhoods, Hampton Green and Forest Brook Estates and
Brandywine.
yeah, Brandywine, thank you. All those are really standalone neighborhoods with no connection to others. This one connects to Millstone Ridge and also to the Reed Harkey area. So there are some interconnections between the other neighborhoods.
Okay. Thank you, CJ. All right, so we are at the point in the public hearing for the public to provide input.
May I make one point of clarification?
Yes.
The law is pretty clear that a petition, regardless of whether it's an assessment petition or an annexation petition, a petition stands on its own. This petition called for 100% assessment. The commentary about a lesser percentage would not apply here because this petition has to stand on its own. You can't reduce that assessment percentage at this point. If they withdraw, they could come back later, but this petition remains a 100% petition, which is why we've already, this is a continued public hearing also from the June 10th, so it wasn't a deferral of the adopting the resolution, but a continuance of the public hearing just to keep the record straight. But I just want everybody to understand that the petition stands or falls on its own as submitted,
Which is 100%.
which is 100%.
So, quick clarification, I see Commissioner Urban with a wrinkled forehead there. So the issue is, still the 50% threshold applies, so 51%,
Yes.
over 50% of the homeowners have to agree. In this case, right now, as it stands, over 51%, or over 50% of the homeowners agree to pay 100% of the cost.
That's correct.
Mr. Miller?
Clarification, 100% of the cost less the bond of
Correct.
38,000?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone who would like to speak in support or opposition to this special assessment? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and address. Anyone who would like to speak in support or opposition? Please come up to the podium and state your name and your address, please.
Brad Parker, 1115 Acacia Street, Matthews, North Carolina. And Mr. Mayor and Board, I've been working with our community trying to work through this, and I know I've emailed the board on a couple of occasions about this. We did not realize even until just a few minutes ago that we could make another petition for a lower percentage of the cost of the project. I think what surprised the residents was with the estimate of $2,500 in January of this year, and then the cost coming back at more than double of that. That's what kind of took the residents back and made us kind of just rethink things. And in particular, since about a third of our subdivision there is used on Lightwood Drive and Cochran Woods Lane as a pass-through to Millstone Ridge and also to the Wood Hollow, Reed Harkey subdivisions, we felt like the town may find in the best interest to support the residents of our community and even the residents of our neighboring community. Since that road has been used, it has deteriorated over 12 years of use because people are using it as a pass-through. And so some of the additional costs and the deterioration of that road is because it's not just used for the 12 homes that are currently built, it's used for hundreds of homes that are in that development. And so because the costs were much higher than the town estimated, that's why an email was sent to the mayor and to the board about that. And hence we did not realize that we could make another petition for a lower percentage. We figured that it would be 100% of whatever the bond was, and then if the town also contributed additional resources, we would pay 100% of what was remaining. And that was our thinking behind that. So we are, in general, I think the community is in favor of the project because long-term it makes sense for the town of Matthews and for our neighborhood, and we think that it has mutual benefit and therefore potentially share in the cost of it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in support or opposition?
Matthew Timmerman, 1107 Acacia Street. Ladies, gentlemen of the board, thank you so much for your time. It's a shame that we're all having to spend this much time on an issue just because one developer didn't meet his financial obligation to the residents of our neighborhood. But I appreciate it. It's not a problem that you created, but I appreciate that we're all together trying to find an answer to the problem. Brad's done a great job kind of getting the neighbors together. We didn't realize that a not 100% assessment was even a possibility. I think, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, you know a lot better the way that you do business here with the town and how things need to be done. As a neighborhood, January 19th, we find out that, hey guys, for the first time, we learned the developer's not going to finish the roads. I have an 8-year-old daughter, a 6-year-old son, a 1-year-old son. They're out there on their bikes, they're riding around. We've lived in 1107 Acacia Street in this neighborhood since 2010, and we have seen the road deteriorate. For them it's fun. There's more cracks to ride around on their bikes, and but eventually, one of them's gonna fall and it's not gonna be fun anymore. So we wanna see it fixed, but at the same time, when CJ comes and says, hey guys, I've got terrible news, $2,500 for each lot, that was a lot to take in. That's a lot of money away from families. I've been a resident of Matthews really my whole life. I grew up here. I grew up in 28105. My parents still live in Sardis Plantation in the house that I grew up in. This is the first time I've ever been in this room, but I love Matthews. I love the town. You guys have done a great job, obviously, because this is a great place to live, but this is a tough pill to swallow because when you buy a house in a town from a reputable builder, you expect that, okay, I've bought this house and they're going to do the things that they need to do. So CJ comes to us, says that wasn't the case. Sure, we can go after him in court, we can figure that out, but $2,500 was a lot of money. And now to say it's going to be $5,200 per lot, that's a lot more money. So, Mr. Buckley, I hear what you're saying, the 100% assessment is what we're talking about today, but I don't know how we conduct business to say, Matt, $2,500 is the amount that we initially quoted, and maybe the town can work with the residents of Acacia because it isn't a closed-off neighborhood, because it is a pass-through for other residents of Matthews, and we can get there somehow back to something close to, the shock that you initially received back in January of $2,500 per lot. I don't know how we get there, but at the end of the day, I'm going to support something that gives my kids safe roads to ride on, and eventually, as they grow up, safe roads to drive on as they come home. So I don't know if that really meets the criteria for speaking, but now you've heard from a resident as to exactly kind of where our minds are at. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? If you could state your name and address, please.
Amalia Morel, 1342 Lightwood Drive. Thank you.
If you could speak
for
into the
listening.
microphone, we're having a little hard time hearing you.
1342 Lightwood Drive. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the board, for listening to us. I moved to the neighborhood in 2012, and at that time, I never heard anything about an issue with the roads or with the developer. The first time I heard it was in January when C.J. O'Neill came to us and talked to us, thanks to our neighbor that came in and saw that the streets weren't getting repaired. My question is, how is it that I was able to buy a house and no one told me that there was a problem with a developer? Had I known that, perhaps I wouldn't have bought the house. So I'm trying to understand what happened here. Where was the ball dropped? Why are we where we are today? I don't understand it. This is my sixth home, and I've never, ever, ever gone through something like this. So I'm trying to understand what's different about this. With all the different builders, I've lived in Virginia, I've lived in Tampa, I've lived in Charlotte, and now I moved to Matthews. So what made this situation different? And why is it that I'm having to bear that burden for that developer that didn't do what he was supposed to do? That's where I'm wrapped around. I'm willing to go through with what the residents are doing, but at the same time, I have questions because somehow it looks like somebody dropped the ball somewhere.
CJ, do you think you could address that? Thank you, ma'am.
I'm not sure how to address that. We have a certain procedure that we follow. The county inspects the roads after a certain period of time, and it's really up to the developer to fulfill his obligations. We have a bond there to try to help him do that, and at the time that this was put in place, it was sufficient. What we didn't know is that the legislation was going to change the playing field on us so that they could lower the cost below what it would take to complete it. Moving forward, we have changed what we're doing because of this new legislation for future developments, but unfortunately, it was too late for this one.
And with the new development, the streets that are part of that new development are private streets until the town accepts them into the street grid.
Any new development.
Based upon the fact that they've been done properly and meet all the standards.
Correct. Every development's in that situation.
Mr. Buckley?
Well, if I may, let me ask a question for Charlie. Are those, and I reckon I'm asking you, Charlie, are those streets private streets at this point in time?
That's correct.
So in other words, if they're pass-throughs, they could block them, block the street.
Well, let me say this. They're in a dedicated to the public right-of-way that the public, i.e. the town, has not yet accepted for maintenance. But they have no individual right to block that public right-of-way even though it doesn't belong to the public yet, because it was dedicated in the original subdivision plat as a right-of-way. So no individual has the right to block that street.
So they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yes. And I was going to say, Mayor, if I could jump in right here. Part of the problem is to try to address what you're saying, how did we get here? We don't know when a developer is officially in default. He doesn't come tell the town, okay, I'm not going to build anymore. He just closes up shop and moves away, and he hadn't finished yet. But until there's some trigger there, the town doesn't sit in a position where it watches him daily and what he's doing or keeps up with it. The county is the one, by the way, we keep saying the town did this, but the county is the one who issues permits and sits in a position of maintaining the bond and that kind of thing. as the zoning, or not as zoning, but as a subdivision agent for the town. They don't know if a developer's in default yet or not. It wasn't until recent months that we found out the developer was not going to complete the project. And it was at that point then we started looking into, and the community started asking questions about, well, how do we get out of this? The problem is, we don't know how to make that develop. We have no tools to make that developer complete it. He just is financially unable to do that. And that's the problem.
Ma'am, if you could come to the microphone, I'm sorry. We need to have it on the record.
Thanks for addressing.
Thank you.
But my question again is it fair to pass that burden to us, since it seems like you don't know what the developer is doing,
Well,
no one's checking at the time?
Fairness, really, I'm going to say something you're not going to like. Fairness has nothing to do with it. The process is, he is a developer, he's a businessman, he has the right to conduct his business the way he wants to, without the government telling him how he can or cannot do his business. Okay? But is it fair? The fairness question boils down to, historically, the town has never had the public pay for the improvements of private roads, meaning the taxpayers. So the question of fairness, is it now going to fall down upon the taxpayers of the town of Matthews to upgrade these private roads to a standard where the town can accept them for maintenance? Is that a burden of the taxpayers? Or is it the burden of still the developer or his subsequent, the developer could still sell his business to somebody else to come in and complete the development. Now, that is going to happen, but that is a possibility. So it's a balancing act here, but the law is that the town only has limited authority here. One of the things it can do is a special assessment, which that petition was submitted saying, okay, town, we will do a special assessment where we will take that per lot basis and we will pay that over up to 8 years on each individual burden of the property owners. We will pay that back over an 8-year time period in installment payments if you will then improve the road up to the point where it meets standards and the town can accept it, and it'll be a town road thereafter, and there'll be no maintenance responsibilities on the subdivision. But that's the sensitivity. And the sensitivity also is, historically, but then you heard CJ mention that all the other subdivisions where they had the special assessments were single street subdivisions, just with internal one street. There is a distinction here, admittedly, but historically it's always required 100% assessment because of the balance and the fairness to the property owners, but also to the taxpayers of the town. It was managed that way. That's why I guess it was believed that 100% was the only percentage that would be acceptable. But politically, the board can approve a petition of a lesser percentage on a special assessment. Legally, it can do that. Now, whether it will do that or not, I don't speak for the board on that. I don't want to be perfectly clear on that, but I'm just saying that is a legal opportunity available to the homeowners who are having to ultimately finance this construction. And then a fairness then comes in, because there is connectivity to other subdivisions, then is that such a burden on the taxpayers or not to have a lesser percentage? Only these gentlemen can answer that. Ladies and gentlemen can answer that. I can't answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Thank you.
I remember you, Barbara.
Mr. Miller?
Thank you. I guess this question would be for CJ probably, if he knows the answer. Was the original bond for more than $38,000?
It's my recollection that it was closer to $150,000, but that's recollection from a long
That's
time
fine.
ago.
And the county refunds portions of the bond as the development happens?
Per state law, yes.
I would think that we could talk to someone, I'm not for money, but we could talk to someone in the county about, hey, you're releasing the bonds a little too quickly. I would think it'd be the final 2 inches of pavement before they get the, close to the full amount of bonds. Isn't this the same cul-de-sac that's missing a connective sidewalk as well? That
It
we
is.
talked about, a year or two ago or something?
It is.
Point out, the releasing of the funds is not a county discretion. It all goes in with the formula that the General Assembly has created.
Well, then it's gotta be done, huh?
It's got to be done. Yeah, I know, but I'm saying.
But I'm just suggesting that this process needs review,
No question about that.
because the money isn't sufficient to cover
That's correct.
a developer, and I would be really curious as to whether this developer is in Kannapolis or Monroe or somewhere right now, and I would show up at that development and say, you want to see the quality of work he's doing? Take pictures and, see if he's got a Facebook wall or something like that. And but really, the takeaway problem that I see is the county is releasing a portion of the bonds way too soon. I don't know if it's by dollar value or what the litmus test is, what the checkoffs are, but until that final two inches of asphalt is in and a few other items, they're releasing it too quickly, and the citizens are bearing the burden.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Miller, members of the board, I would like to kind of talk a little bit about this. So in my experience with the county, if they're left to their own devices, just like the town, they would be very conservative. In other words, they would require a performance bond that was high enough to realize sometimes these developments take a long time to build out, and then to factor in inflation. And I feel like, and at one time, the policy was much more restrictive or punitive on the developer, okay? Well, the development community felt like, look at the county holding my dollars, that's my capital that I could turn around. And so recently, the General Assembly changed the law on performance bonds and made it much more restrictive on what you can hold and what you have to reimburse. So, if we're going to talk about who's responsible here, I do feel like the General Assembly has set up a system to help the developers at the expense of, in this case, homeowners.
Mr. Higdon?
To add on what the town manager just said, I would encourage everybody that's affected by this assessment to contact our state legislatures and get the law changed, because it's a really bad law, in my opinion. Secondly, I suspect that some of the folks that voted to approve to proceed with the assessment 100% were unaware, as they've said, that there would be a possibility that this board may approve less than 100%. So we have 3 options here, but there really is a 4th that perhaps we could come back at a later time with a proposed lower assessment. Is that a possibility?
Well, the petition still is for 100%, and the only way to avoid that is to have enough people withdraw from that petition, and then they come back and submit a new petition with some lower percentage than 100%. But we cannot assess anything for street purposes unless there's been a petition.
Mr. Mint?
Yes, CJ, on the other 3 you mentioned where this sort of situation has happened, it was uniquely different than this one where there were no other connective streets. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Contained neighborhoods. So these people seem to be in such a unique situation where the roads are shared with other people. So that burden is falling all on them, and I don't think it should fall all on them or completely all on the rest of the taxpayers either. And they've been put in an awkward place with the General Assembly and the changing of the legislature. So I'd really like for us to be able to find some sort of compromise, and I was thinking the same thing as Mayor Pro Tem Higdon on this one. I think there is that 4th option, but that would be, Charlie, if I'm hearing you correctly, that would be up to the people who signed the the petition to be able to get that catalyst rolling. Is that right?
Well, it would require that enough people withdraw in order for a new petition to be submitted. And we'd have to start the process over again.
But it would be, and they would have to be the catalyst to do that. They would
That's
have to
correct.
withdraw and then present another
We cannot do
petition.
a special assessment for street purposes unless there has been a petition to do that.
I just, we intend on taking those streets over as town streets at some point, but I don't think the burden lies all on the town or all on general taxpayers or all on just those neighbors either. It's just a shame. It's very unfortunate the situation has occurred.
Let me just add a comment. I understand what you're saying, and Mr. Higdon, what you're saying. We just need to be careful and think about the fact that once we set a precedence, then we get on a slippery slope. And do we have situations where developers are far more willing to walk away from a project because the people that they're selling to aren't necessarily going to have to pick up the burden? So we just need to think about that in reviewing this and taking a look at this. I believe that it's when you buy your house, the expectation is that the streets are done. It's part of the cost of the house, and I agree it's an unfortunate situation with this particular developer. But we just need to think about that and consider it as we move forward. Mr. Melton and Mr. Urban.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I've got it. Thanks, Heath. I've got a couple questions for the attorney. If this petition is withdrawn by the citizens, are there any restrictions or timeframes where they have to reapply or they cannot repetition?
No, that only applies in zoning.
If the town board were to deny this petition, is there any time restriction or time frame where they have to wait or have to apply by?
No, sir.
To the lady's point a few minutes ago, if one of these homeowners would go to sell their home, would they have to include this on a real estate disclosure statement?
It would have to show up as being a private road.
Okay. Would they have to also disclose the potential or petition for the assessment?
Well, the only time you have to really, well, I won't say only time, but until there's been an assessment roll adopted, there is no lien against the property.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Urban?
The overarching comment is I agree with Commissioner Higdon and the comment about the legislators. I think it would behoove this board to send a letter off to Raleigh and on our behalf, not only the citizens. Here's an unintended consequence. It sucks, bottom line. But CJ, some specific questions. Specifically, let me distinguish here. Is this a deal where there was a land developer and a builder took down the lots?
So it's my understanding that you had a land developer who developed the infrastructure,
Did the
started, and
horizontal.
then sold the lots to builders who built the houses.
And he has sold those lots to the vacant, those lots that are remaining are now sold?
Except for one,
The developer still has?
correct.
Okay, that's case in point one, all right. So then, is there any process, I know it's happened before, where in the end game, the developer has to come back in order for you to take the road, he has to document the road, he has to create a plat and a survey. Is that taking place?
So that portion of it, where they plat the road, is done prior to the development.
Okay, so they don't go back out and do an as-built and then get a sign-off of each homeowner and the town?
No, there's an as-built of the storm system, but that's just to the town.
Yeah. The subdivision plan is filed initially before any house is sold.
Okay, so they don't come back to the, for an as-built?
correct.
Because sometimes roads don't go in correctly, they gotta go back to the homeowner and say, hey, we gotta take 3 more feet, 2 more feet, so none of that occurred?
Correct.
Okay. Darn, I was looking for that loophole. Okay. The only other thing I say from the time is not necessarily on your side, but the good news is that from an asphalt price situation, as we move into the fall, we get out of the special blends and things like that, and fuel oil and stuff in the summer, we might get a little bit, but I'm not sure we're gonna see the kind of numbers we're talking about. So maybe the fact that with a little bit of time, we see some relief, but that's all I can find. Thank you.
Mr. Query?
Mr. Melton asked the question I was going to ask. I'm all right.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Is there anyone who would like to speak in support or opposition to the special assessment? Okay. Seeing none, the next thing we wanted to do, we have talked about the withdrawal process several times. We do have forms with the town clerk over here. The statement has been made, and you would sign and put your address on there stating your withdrawal from the existing petition if you would like to do that. This will come up for an approval or denial on item 13A. So Mr. O'Neill will be here for that. And so CJ, I'll trust for you to keep up with any further withdrawals that are given to the clerk. So if you'd like to do that, you can just come around and pick that up. Mr. Query?
Yeah, as we go forward, Kent brings up other questions. And I reckon this one is to Charlie too. Would it be in the best interest and time of the residents for us to deny this, to get this moved off of it so they can apply a new petition without having to withdraw it? I mean, they would have to have people sign to withdraw now. If we deny it now, then they would just go forth with a new petition?
Well, right now, the only thing you can do to deny it would be simply not to approve the resolution on 13A to move the project forward. You just vote it down, and then if they wanted to submit a new petition, they could do that. Nobody has to actually come in and withdraw. You just would have denied that.
So that would
to adopt the resolution. That would, well,
that would speed
as far as
things
this petition is concerned, that would stop it right there. And if they want to submit a new petition next week, they could do that, or later tonight.
Okay, because my concern is, getting the people to come up and have their name taken off. That's all going to take time, and it seems like at this point in time we don't know where the commission we're going to be in relation to approving the monies or whatever. To me, it would be to their advantage or to our advantage and theirs for us to go forward and deny it or not approve it, as you said.
You just simply don't adopt that resolution.
Okay, thank you.
And we will get to that at 13A, but we are providing the opportunity, should anyone like to withdraw, they can do that.
Is it two
individuals.
withdraw, then the petition dies?
Correct. And if those are not withdrawn, then that kind of echoes a different perspective by the homeowners. Mr. Urban?
Charlie, quick question. If the developer still owns one of those lots, you know where I'm going with this?
No.
You don't?
No,
Oh,
go
good.
ahead.
If the developer owns one of these lots, and yet the developer is saying, I default, I don't have any assets, is that lot not an asset?
Well, it may be an asset, but it's not going to complete its project.
Why not? Why can't they be clawed back from him to pay for the deficit in finishing the street?
How do you make him convey that property? You can't.
Well, you're the attorney, I'm not.
I know, I'm saying you cannot make somebody. Well, if we condemn it, it's our property, but that doesn't change the fact that there's nobody to provide for the roads.
And nobody would buy it.
But you gotta condemn it for a public purpose, and just because he's being a meanie doesn't mean that's a public purpose.
Well, I'm not saying it's a meaning, but the fact is that you willy-nilly sort of,
Yeah, but I'm
going
not
to
making a
default.
point,
He has assets, that asset is sitting right there on that road.
Well, maybe not sufficient asset to be able to build the road, though, to construct the road, complete the construction of the road.
Does anybody have leaning rights against
No.
that property?
No. The only lien right that arises out of all of this would be if we ever adopted an assessment role. Then that's our lien against the property for the cost, per lot cost.
Okay.
Okay, I think we finished this. We've exhausted the process. So again, if anyone wants to withdraw, Mr. O'Neill does have the forms, I believe, and it's a simple 2-minute process. Okay, let's move on to the next item, item 8B. This is zoning application 2019-697. This is the Harkey property at 2026 Matthews Mint Hill Road. And to ensure that awareness, there is a memo in the package where the representative has asked for a continuation of the public hearing on this zoning application. Jay?
Yeah, as the mayor mentioned, this represents the second continuance. So tonight's our third public hearing date to discuss this project. The continuance would yield a fourth. Your board has two options at this juncture. You can go ahead and grant the continuance and move this out to August 12th, I believe, is the hearing date. Or the applicant does have updated site plans and building elevations they provided today as an alternative if you want to move forward and close the public hearing this evening. But it's the board's pleasure.
I would prefer us to leave the public hearing open and continue it because I believe we just, like you said, we just got those plans today. We haven't had an opportunity to look at them. You haven't seen them.
That's correct.
And changes will be, if changes have occurred and we close the public hearing, then the public will not have an opportunity to make comments on those changes. So, do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Melton, seconded by Commissioner Higdon. Any discussion? Mr. Miller?
So just to be clear, we'll continue the public hearing until August 12th, and at that point, there will be architectural elevations, correct? I see them nodding their heads in the rear.
August 5th. August 5th.
Yes.
August 5th.
Oh, that's right.
We changed the meeting date to the first
Oh,
Monday.
that's right.
I apologize for that. I
Rescheduled
forgot
it.
about the change.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Query?
Have you seen the plans that they have with them tonight, Jay?
We were provided a copy to bring just for the applicant. We really just uploaded the plans about 15 minutes ago. I've not reviewed them.
Okay, my question is, if you looked at it all, is the commercial piece still involved in it?
It is, yes.
Okay, I can't do that.
All right, no further questions. All those in favor of the motion to continue the public hearing, raise your hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously.
It wasn't unanimous.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand go up. So Commissioner Query voted in opposition to the continuance of the public hearing. Okay, next item is item 8C, zoning application 2019-698. This is for Elizabeth Lane Elementary to change the existing conditions on that certain RICD, on that certain property designated as 121 Elizabeth Lane, and further being commonly referred to as Elizabeth Lane Elementary School and designated as tax parcel 227-034-91. Mr. Camp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is a change of conditions request. Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools is requesting a 2-year extension to the sunset provision at the site. I think we're all aware that this comes back annually. This began, I believe, in 2017. Based on my notes here, you'll see on the associated map the location of the mobile units. There was a mobile boundary, and I'll show you that in a subsequent map, that was established in 1995. Those boundaries have been modified over the years. to bring the total classrooms to 17 mobile units at the site. And you'll see here the area kind of in purple was the original boundary. You can see the location of the mobiles. Obviously, what's out there today exceeds the original 1995 boundary. This line right here represents the 2019 boundary that we are currently using that the board approved last year. This is the proposed site plan. Essentially, this is just a carbon copy of what is on the site today. And again, some additional aerials of the site.
Mr. Camp, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
Mr. Bent, you need to excuse yourself. I'm sorry.
Yes, I do. I need to excuse myself from this because I do have adjacent property to the school.
All right, so the board
So
is...
what she's doing is, it's under our local ordinance, that's a conflict of interest. So since it's a conflict of interest, then you're recusing, not excusing.
Okay.
Going to recuse yourself from either deliberating and or voting on this petition.
Okay. So the board is now, thank you, Mr. Buckley. The board is now sitting with Commissioner DeMint recused from the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Camp. You can continue forward.
Sure. And I will note here on the zoning conditions, that should say August 1st, 2021 per the request. And I want to make a quick clarification too, that CMS initially requested a 2-year sunset. We've been doing 1 year. Manager Blodgett and myself did meet with Dr. Wilcox, who is here this evening, if you have any questions for him. Lansdowne Elementary, a new school is going to be built and open, we hope in fall of 2021. After discussion with staff, we feel that maybe a 3 or a 4-year sunset would be appropriate. It would allow that larger, what we'll call a relief school to open. We don't know exactly how it's going to shake out with school district boundaries, but the board, our recommendation would the board at least consider a 3 or 4-year sunset to give that new school time to be constructed and open, rather than have us come through this process annually over the next 2 or 3 years. So again, that's the staff recommendation, that you all would at least consider a 3-year or a 4-year sunset at the site. And one last item here. In 2018, a queuing study was conducted by CMS, by a design resource group. There were some recommendations in the study. Some have been implemented, some have not. The recommendation from Dana Stujanki, our transportation planner, would be for the school to look at implementing one of the options that was outlined in that queuing study. And in the afternoon hour, and Susan, correct me if I get this wrong, it would be to allow traffic to queue into the bus lot to get cars off of Elizabeth Lane. Did I get that correct? And I'm sorry, Dana, I didn't see you there. And if you want to clarify that, please come up if I did not get that right. Queuing into the staff lot. Thank you. We, as you all know, we had discussions about this at the planning conference about concerns of queuing Elizabeth Lane, cars crossing the center line into oncoming traffic to around the queued vehicles. So that is the only item that staff is recommending this go around that has any impact to the school. So that is one additional item I wanted to add to our staff report. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you all may have at this time.
Mr. Urban?
So let me, Jay, if you go to figure number 1.
Sure.
Where it says existing morning arrival operation plan, is it really existing, or is this the suggested morning arrival plan? Because what you just said is you're going to start queuing. Now, the staff lot's to the north, correct?
Yeah, I think it was page 6. Let me go. Okay, you're looking at figure 1.
I was looking at figure 1. So figure 1
Right.
is an accurate statement. It is the existing morning arrival operation plan?
Yeah, to follow the morning arrival, that's correct.
So do we have a suggested queuing plan? So we have a suggested afternoon dismissal operation plan. I saw that. It's figure number 5.
Yeah, okay.
But do we actually have a figure that has suggested morning?
The morning is not the issue, it's the afternoon.
It's the afternoon that's the
Yes.
issue? So figure 5 is really what we're talking about. It's the suggested afternoon dismissal plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Jay, you had, I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, let me ask a quick question. You had mentioned the 3 years. Is the petitioner able to speak to us on their acceptance of a 3 or 4 year window?
Absolutely.
First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to address the commissioners this evening. We absolutely.
Superintendent Clayton Wilcox from
Oh.
CMS Schools.
I'm
And if you could
Superintendent
give
Clayton
your
Wilcox, 12363 Burr Oak Lane, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners, and thank you for kind of your ongoing support. What we've looked at is this queuing plan will cause us some distress, but not anything that we can't get over. We absolutely will do our very best to make it work. I was just speaking with the principal of the school, and she assures me that it can be done. What will be a concern is emergency vehicle access during this extended queuing period, because they won't be able to come in the same way that they had before. But we'll look at that and see how we can best address that in the days ahead.
Okay. And on the 3 year sunset instead of 2 years.
Thank you. And
I guess I was concerned that doing student reassignment and trying to deal with this situation simultaneously would not be a real benefit for our citizens whose children go to school there. It seems like it would be better to go ahead and do the student reassignment in 21 and then come back and visit this in 22 once we understand what the area looks like, the demographics.
Mayor
who's
Bailey,
going to what
I think
school.
that's a wise position. We know that Lansdowne Elementary School, first of all, is scheduled to be completed, but there are the possibilities, given construction costs, given construction delays, that we may be a little bit late with that. We don't believe that to be the case, but it might be true. But the other thing is that we would begin that rezoning of the student population right in a time frame that would just create some additional confusion we don't think that we need. My suggestion would be to go out to at least 3 years, and then we could come back and talk to you about would we need that 4th year. But you know, we know that Lansdowne will have 13 additional classrooms than we have right now in the area. We believe that we can dedicate some to growth, but we also know that there may be a little redistricting that has to be done to take advantage of those additional classrooms. It also gives us some time, as I was talking with the principal just a few moments ago, to take a look at a solution that's better than the portable solution that we now have at Elizabeth Lane.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Wilcox. Whoever's controlling the screen, if you can go to the bottom of page 6, please.
Of the traffic study?
Yes. Page 6, it's up further above the maps and things. I'm just going to get some takeaways that I'd like to summarize and ask if they're acceptable. I believe it's that right there. The bottom 3 bullets, the black bullets, are what I'm going to pull from in summary. This is recommendations from Design Resource Group in reaction to the queuing study. And the first bullet point, implement a traffic management plan similar to the current morning arrival plan, which is acceptable. So once the queue in Lot B reaches Elizabeth Lane, parents enter Lot A, which is the bus lot, to begin stacking as they currently do in the morning peak. Once dismissal begins, the vehicles queued in Lot A can begin moving to Lot B for student pickup. And at the bottom of that, this change will provide 1,850 feet of on-site stacking. Second bullet point, an off-duty officer directing traffic at each of the lot access locations for the minimum 30-minute period as noted above, which will help with the overall circulation and flow of vehicles entering and exiting the school. And in the third bullet point, about halfway through, it's considered a reasonable solution if all vehicles in the queue are allowed to clear Lot A before bus loading begins, typically a 10 or 15-minute process, therefore eliminating any conflicts between students and vehicle traffic. I'm glad that we completed a queuing study. I'm glad that it was a third-party study, et cetera. my question to you, Superintendent Wilcox, is we want to work with you. Are you willing to implement the recommendations from Design Resource Group that, as I highlighted right there?
As I understand them, yes, we are willing to do that. I think one of the things that we're going to have to talk with your chief about is the off-duty officers, how we could best accomplish that.
Okay.
But beyond that, I think the additional queuing space is something that we absolutely have committed to.
Thank you. It's been a hot spot for me for some time, and you know, when traffic was backing out onto 51 and all the crossing of the yellow lines, we felt that this was a strong opportunity for safety. And if you can commit to that, then I think this commissioner can work with you on many other solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Query?
Yes.
Mr. Irvin?
And something you've heard before, if we allow the 3 years, will you allow us to put the safety on all the trailers in Matthews that we have requested before?
Commissioner, I'm not sure what you're suggesting.
When you and I discussed, and you said the board denied it, that we could put cameras outside each classroom and a video screen in the classroom so the teacher knows who's outside instead of telling Johnny to open the door when she don't know who's out there.
Commissioner, we have camera systems that now view every one of the doors, and we have access in the classroom for teachers to see the doors before they release kids into those main passage areas in between. We've also added fencing. Your chief of police has been out and has actually said that he thought the solution we had was an adequate solution, and in fact liked the fact that it was tied to our overall security solution, because they probably could not monitor those cameras 24 hours a day like we do already in CMS.
Okay, let's get clear of some of that, because the cameras you told me that you had last time were shooting down a line of trailers, and that the teacher, if she wants to access it on her computer, she's able to do that. I'm asking for a camera on each door that's always on, and she is the only one that's looking at it to see who's outside her door before she opens that door. And I've asked for this, as a commissioner, I've asked for this for 3 years.
And as a superintendent, I've said, we're not going to do it that way, Commissioner, but we certainly are going to provide safety and security to all the kids.
But you will not give the security that we think is necessary for our Matthews students. You're relying on what you think, and this is an added benefit, not anything taken away from yours. This
Commissioner,
is an added benefit.
if the town of Matthews wants to purchase cameras for every classroom, pay for them and put it as part of our system, we'll certainly allow them to be installed, but quite frankly, I think it'd be a waste of your resources to do it that way, and it would go against the guidance of safety professionals that we've employed to secure our students. But certainly, if this commission wants to put a camera outside of every building, because you think you can get better coverage, we will, as long as it's tied to our system, not to an independent system.
We have no problem. We'll furnish you the money to put the camera there, if that is what we had to say at one time. But we don't want it monitored by your home department. We want it to where the teacher can see before she opens, or anybody opens her door.
Teachers already have that access, but if you want a redundant service, we'll work on it.
But yours is if she wants to. She can do it on her computer if she wants to, is what you told me before. You said the teacher has access on her computer to see that if she needs to.
And the teacher can leave that running all the time that she's in the classroom in a minimized window, or the teacher? I think we're quibbling about something that is already in place, but certainly if, we're not going to put a monitor up on the wall that's always up and on, that kids are distracted by to watch every other kid who comes out into the main hallway. That doesn't seem to me a prudent instructional strategy from my perspective as a superintendent. But certainly we could even say to our teachers, you must keep it up in a minimized screen on all of your computers. We could do that.
Okay, and the problem being is, I don't think that's any more distraction than the kids coming and going outside the door anyhow, because that's the only time she would be distracted, or anybody would be distracted, is when they're coming and going. So I want you to think about that before we come to vote, is we're beating around the bush about which is better, and that's something that our chief and your chief at one point in time said would be an asset, and you denied it last time.
Once again, I think what we have is a solution that works for our kids. I think that what you're asking for is something that's redundant and quite frankly, something that even your chief and our principal and our chief have now said we've handled already. But again, I'll defer to the wisdom of the commissioners and your colleagues on the board.
Mr. Wilcox, would you be willing to meet with our police chief and your CMS chief and
Absolutely.
and commissioners just to better understand the system that you have in place and how you...
Absolutely, and
Okay.
I believe that a number of people within the community, larger community, have done just that, but we'll do it again.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Urban?
The only quick question I have is that you made a mention of it briefly in all the little figures. It says student traffic control by, a safety guard and stuff like that, and the final renditions are talking about an off-duty police officer you alluded to. Can I get a little more clarification? Is that an off-duty officer that we're supplying, or is the school paying for?
School pays for it.
See, I don't know the answer to that. That's why I said I'd have to visit with your chief of police to see, how we'd go about that.
Okay.
So when I heard the comment, what I thought about, well, I guess I did assume that CMS would pay for the officer, just like the churches do or whatever. The tough part is finding officers that can do it. They're kind of overstretched because they have so many of these requests. I'm not sure we got folks to be willing to do it. Now, maybe we do, but that would be the, now maybe the sheriff's department, maybe between CMPD, us, and the sheriff's department, there probably are officers they could find to do it, but it's.
Well,
it's
the
discretion
window's very narrow. I mean, they have it listed from 225 to 255, so I mean, it should be sort of comforting that it's not a 3 or 4 hour event, but I'd like to have some clarity on that.
Any other questions? Any questions from,
So CMS did agree
you need to state your name.
I'm
again.
sorry, Crystal Lale, principal at Elizabeth Lane, 1825 Danny Court. So CMS did agree to fund the officer, and Matthews posted for the officer last year from August until January and was not able to secure anyone to do the off-duty work. So they have used the DARE officers and the resource team to help manage traffic from February until June, and it does make a big difference. But the problem was getting, someone to work within those hours from the Matthews Police Department.
And the reason I actually said we had to visit with the chief is because this does say that both entries will be manned, which exacerbates the challenge that we faced earlier. It now would be 2 officers, not 1.
Okay, are there any questions from the Planning and Zoning Board? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. CJ, do you have anything else to add?
No, I do not.
Okay. So is there anyone who would like to speak in support or opposition to zoning application 2019-698, Elizabeth Lane Elementary? If so, please come to the podium, state your name and your address. Anyone who would like to speak in support or opposition? Okay, seeing none. This application will go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their July 23rd meeting, and it will be able to come back to the town board at the meeting on August the 5th. Okay? All right, the next item is item 8D. Please recognize that Commissioner DeMint is back with us for this particular motion. It's motion 2019-3 to amend the UDO to create the entertainment district overlay that would apply to the same geographical boundaries of the entertainment district small area plan and the adoption of said boundaries on the zoning map. Mr. Camp.
Mr. Mayor, I want to introduce Jonathan Wells. He is a planning consultant that's been helping us out on a part-time basis in the department. He's been charged with bringing a new version of this ENT overlay before you all over the past several months and has put together a presentation. You did have in the original zoning application from April the full text of that overlay. However, this is just a summary of where we've been and kind of what the major points are. Jonathan?
right. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. It's a pleasure being here tonight with you. So the topic tonight is to talk about, as Jay pointed out, proposed entertainment overlay district that is a successor to the entertainment small area plan. And if I can acclimate myself to this, all right, good. To provide a little bit of a chronology, on December 8th, 2014, the commissioners adopted the Entertainment District Small Area Plan. This involved about 311 acres of land near US 74 and I-485. In February of 2015, commissioners adopted the Entertainment District Small Area Plan policy statement. That's a companion policy statement to the small area plan. During the majority of last year, 2018, there was a vetting process, consideration and public vetting of a potential inclusion of an overlay district in the UDO to include, in addition to the entertainment district, also the Monroe Road and East John Street outer loop areas. These were also both covered under previous small area plans. And the intent at the time was to create a single overlay district that would have covered all three geographies. On December 10th of 2018, the commissioners did not approve the staff proposal to create this single overlay classification for all three small area planning areas. In February 2019, during the annual Commissioners Planning Conference, staff was directed to bring back a proposed entertainment overlay district specific to the entertainment overlay area to the Commission for their consideration. So tonight, that's exactly what we are prepared to do. A little bit of background on overlay districts. They have been employed in Matthews as well as other jurisdictions for a number of years. The downtown overlay district has been in place since 1989, and the NC 51 highway overlay district has been in place since 1991. So there's about a 30-year history within the town of Matthews of the employment and the use of overlay districts. The enactment of overlay districts typically follow an in-depth study of critical geographic areas, and in this instance, they follow the completion and adoption of small area plans. These overlay districts allow the pre-existing base zoning to remain in place, thereby initiating additional zoning and development requirements with a goal of achieving the goals of the adopted small area plans. As a zoning classification, overlays therefore serve as a primary tool to help guide implementation of our adopted small area plans. As I had mentioned, Matthews had developed and adopted several small area plans in recent years. The Entertainment District in 2014, the Monroe Road Small Area Plan in 2014, and the East John Street Outer Loop Small Area Plan in 2017. However, to date, the overlay districts for these three areas have not been adopted or added to the town UDO. So let me get my, I have a feeling Jay's helping me with this. Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I'm a student driver and you're my coach there. That's good. I appreciate that. So the map that is shown on the screen, and I believe is also in your packet, is the proposed entertainment overlay district. Like I said, it's composed of about 311 acres, the same geographic boundaries as the small area plan, located north of Matthews, Mint Hill Road, west of NC 74, and north of I-485. In your agenda packets, should be, you should find the text of the proposed overlay. And I would bring your attention to probably the main course, if I can use that term, which begins on page 2. It's the development standards, subsection C, which really outlines the real kind of meat and potatoes of the overlay and the expectations and the linkages between the proposed overlay and the small area plan. So what we wanted to do is learn from experience and learn from history. And one of the things that was done was looking at public comments and public input received during that vetting process that occurred last year. And there were about 6 or 7 main themes that I was able to pull out of the documentation that I looked at as a result of that process. People talked about the format and content inconsistencies that existed between the proposed overlay ordinance and existing overlay sections in the UDO. There was some concern about those inconsistencies. Also, the entertainment overlay portion of the draft would have required, in the earlier version, land development to be preceded by a rezoning from whatever the base zoning was to the ENT base zoning, and there was some concern expressed with that as well. Also, there were some land uses that were either allowed by right or were permitted with conditions by the underlying zoning that would have been prohibited by the draft overlay. There were several residential uses that would not have been allowable, that were allowable under the R15 base zoning. Also, the use of the term land disturbing activity concerned some folks, in as much as it was vague and not well defined in the UDO. There was also concern about the one-size-fits-all aspect of taking one small area plan overlay district and applying it to 3 rather distinct different geographies throughout the town. There was also concern that the draft ordinance was too wordy, a little bit difficult to understand, and also some ambiguous wording that was in the draft that could have created some confusion and undue latitude for interpretation. So how did we go about addressing each of these concerns? You already moved it for me, didn't you? Son of a gun. Okay. So care was taken to better align the proposed verbiage with the existing overlay sections in the UDO, as well as to the ENT-based zoning. For an example, the site plan requirements wording from other overlays were pretty much adopted into the proposed draft text that is presented for your consideration now. The requirement that the properties in the overlay area be rezoned to the ENT-based classification as a prerequisite of development has been removed. Therefore, land uses allowed by right or under conditions on the underlying zoning will be permitted in the overlay district as revised. The term land disturbing activity is de-emphasized in the new draft wording. The generic nature of the small area plan overlay district has been replaced by a draft that specifically is tailored to the ENT small area plan and geography. Although the draft format may be easily adapted to future small area plan overlay districts, what was done is we took a look at creating something that could be used as a template for instance, the Monroe Road Small Area Plan Overlay District in the event that the town decides to move forward and adopt something like that. The draft ordinance has been shortened and edited for clarity, but it still contains the basic policy directives contained within the Entertainment Small Area Plan, as well as the policy statements that were adopted by the commissioners. We eliminated ambiguous wording, but the draft still provides what we feel is a reasonable degree of latitude to make interpretations central to the goals of the small area plan. I also want to talk about some additional features of the draft ordinance that haven't been touched on yet. First, it doesn't prescribe specific land uses for the study areas, but it does express performance standards and guidelines with regard to implementation. For instance, the text includes a requirement that future residential development should be accompanied by a corresponding amount of supportive commercial development and vice versa. The draft also prohibits big box retail defined as single occupants in excess of 70,000 square feet, but there are exceptions for land uses like movie theaters and hotels. The draft references design principles contained within the policy statement and reiterated in the ENT base zoning with regard to street interconnections, quality of public spaces, diversity of design, and vertical and horizontal mixture of land uses. It also establishes minimum right-of-way widths for the proposed Independence Point Parkway through the area, which is also intended to serve as a right-of-way for the future Silver Line light rail. It specifically references other policy documents that are relevant and with prospective developers need to be familiar, such as the 2013 Matthews Comprehensive Transportation Plan, the 2018 MPO Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and the CATS System Corridor Development Plan. It also clearly describes a site plan submittal and review process. As I mentioned, that's been more closely aligned with other parts of the UDO. It also describes the manner in which small area plan compliance plan, as necessitated by the UDO, is to be developed, designed, and submitted. Finally, as I made reference to earlier, it acknowledges the eventual light rail transit station location and alignment within the area. I know that's a lot to digest. I appreciate your patience. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? None from the board. Are there any questions from the Planning and Zoning Board? Kerry?
Jim, we've got a couple of discussions that we've had ongoing about what we consider to be right-of-use zoning inside of an ENT district with a residential, ENT being a conditional zoning element, whereas by right residential is an opportunity. We've had some dialogue very recently about the potential for changing that zoning because of concerns we have of that development perhaps not following what we'd like the small area plan and ENT to do. If we implement this overlay, does it, your reference that says that right of use can still continue as written, does that still leave us with the problem of properties that may not be compliant with ENT in their base zoning?
I think the real difference is, and I think you're making reference to if there is no change in the base zoning, because a pretty significant portion of that proposed overlay district still carries an R15, I believe, zoning classification.
We have two examples before us now that we considered in the last month or so, though, that are considered residential by right, that are inside or contiguous to this district.
I think the benefit of the the introduction of an overlay district in that area, irrespective of the underlying zoning being residential, is that the overlay district would require an enhanced level of the enhanced performance standards. that are contained not only in the small area plan, but in the proposed overlay district. So,
For layman's terms, what I'm after is if we implement the overlay, we have the right of review regardless of what the base by right zoning is. It will still come before review boards and planning boards for discussion and review of the compliance part of the plan, or it won't. It would not. It would not. So we're not solving the problem of base, by allowing by right usage to exist, continue, regardless of the overlay. We're not affecting the ability to review by right development in those instances. I can speak to that.
well, okay.
Or you can answer the other.
Well, I think it gets back to the issue of the compliance plan that is required of overlay districts within the UDO gives us, and I'll say the town, but it would be a staff function, an enhanced level of review within the context of the requirement that a prospective developer would have to come in and create to the town's satisfaction a compliance plan, compliance with the small area plan requirements, including the design principles.
Does that come to the boards as well as the staff, or just the staff? Staff level.
Any other questions from the Planning and Zoning Board? Any from the Board of Commissioners? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. If there is anyone who would like to speak in support or opposition to motion 2019-3/ENT-O, please come to the podium and state your name and your address. Okay. Seeing none, this particular item will go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their July 23rd meeting, and will have the ability to come back to the Board of Commissioners on August the 5th. Okay, do we have a motion to reconvene the regular meeting?
So moved. Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is planning and development business. You have a report from the planning board. David?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I have the Planning Board report from our June 25th meeting. We had one item on our agenda. It was the administrative amendment, Proximity Matthews landscape changes, 10-413 Monrovia Drive. We voted 6-1 to recommend approval of the revised landscape plan for Proximity Matthews. Our board referred the final decision of this administrative amendment to the town council due to its significance and visibility. And that concludes the report.
Okay. Thank you, David. Okay, next item on the agenda is item 10B, planning and zoning related actions. Item 1, motion 2019-2. This is to change the zoning on 3 parcels. This was deferred from June the 10th, and we do have a memo on this. A little background, this is the motion that we decided to defer for 30 days, and the reason for that was the petitioners of two of these properties had submitted plans and will be coming to us in September. And I think that when we did that, Mr. Camp, you were going to let us know that if progress is continuing to be made on these items.
That's correct. We're currently working on setting up some meetings to go over the components of these 2 new zoning applications, but everything's moving along as planned.
Okay, thank you. So, as we discussed last time, item 10B1, items A, B, and C, we would continue to defer for 30 days until after the public hearing. So do we have a motion to that effect?
So, second.
And we got a motion and a second on that. Any discussion? Mr. Urban?
Clarification, that deferral is to August 5th.
Correct.
Correct.
The memo says 12th.
Yep, 5th.
Okay. So for the record, we'll make that change to August 5th.
Mayor,
Mr. Miller?
just a brief question. Will these three properties be voted on separately?
Mhm.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, next item is 10B2, Proximity Matthews. This particular, Mr. Urban, yes.
Make a vote on the
Oh, I'm
list.
Trying to get through this too fast. Okay, so we have a motion and a second in discussion. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Urban. And now I'll turn back to you for the next particular item.
Under this next one, Proximity Matthews, I'd like to go and ask that I be recused from deliberation and any notations on this particular project. My firm was the architect of record for the vertical portions of this project.
Okay?
Not only from deliberation, but also any voting.
And any voting.
Yes.
Okay. So the board is in this process without Commissioner Urban. This is an administrative amendment. It's coming back to the board. And we've also added a public comments component to this, which is not typical to do. But given the impact of this particular item, we felt it important to provide that opportunity to the public. So with that, Mary Jo Gollins, can you provide us information?
I certainly can. Thank you, Mayor. Again, this evening, it's an administrative amendment for Proximity Matthews to revise the landscape plan that was originally approved on the rezoning 2016-652. The tree save area along the front and side of the property were removed when grading was completed on the property. A fine was assessed. The fine has been paid in full. The developer has agreed to come back with an additional landscape plan that the board must approve. As you mentioned, staff did send out letters to the property owners within 200 feet of the affected property to notify them of the meeting and the possibility to speak this evening. The property was also posted 2 weeks ago to let anyone passing by know of this evening's meeting. With that, the landscape plan has been reviewed by our landscape manager and staff to make sure that it meets our requirements. So for your information, this was the original rezoning plan. And okay, this area here with the bubbles around it was what was supposed to be left as part of the landscape plan. And there's another area right down in here. So those were the areas that were affected by the grading when they removed the trees. There's also a note 7A, I believe it is, in here that references that there will be limited removal of trees along Monroe Road to allow for a meandering sidewalk and to keep as many trees as possible in that area. Again, this shows the area on the original rezoning. This is the vegetation survey, and it shows in these areas what was going to be removed and what was supposed to be left. So this is the most recent landscape plan that has been provided to the town. Oops, sorry about that. Along this area here, where the trees, the pine trees have been left, you'll see this, the lightly drawn circles are what the vegetation that is left and existing. These darker, puffier trees, if you want to say, that is what is going to be installed to fill in the area. Again, the same thing along the front of the site. They're proposing to put two 6-inch diameter, 24-foot tall nuddle trees here, along with knee walls here and in this area. And again, all the trees down in this side that have the black with white circles and all are the existing trees, and all of this other is fill-in vegetation that is being proposed. The applicant also did have a public input session prior to the planning board meeting, the week before the planning board meeting. That report is in the memo that has been provided. There are also additional just section details showing what will be planted in there. The applicant is here if there's any questions, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions, Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mayor. Mary Jo, has the tree and appearance board, I think Ralph, you said Ralph has reviewed this.
Yes.
Has it been through tree and appearance?
They normally don't review landscape plans.
Okay. Because I'm looking on the list of trees, and there's stuff like Coosa dogwoods, crepe myrtles, things that aren't invasive, but they're not natives. And we just reviewed our planting list to exclude non-natives. Do these talk to each other?
No, they did not exclude non-natives.
They did not?
They did not. And those were still left on the planting list because you can't always get native vegetation.
Okay.
And like on NCDOT roads, they want what they call breakaway trees, which are crepe myrtles.
Mm-hmm.
So we did leave the list. We did double check this with the current list, approved list.
While it's not typical, is it out of the question to send this to tree and appearance to have them review it?
That is up to the board. It'll delay it another month or two. They are planning on trying to get this installed in the fall when it's normal planting season. But we've never gone to the tree and appearance board for this type of thing.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from Mary Jo? Okay. No further questions. As I said, this is an administrative amendment that the board will vote on. But for this particular one, we are going to have public comment. So if there is anyone who is present who would like to come up and speak to this particular administrative amendment, please do so. Come to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, town commissioners, town staff. My name is Dustin Mills with Taft Mills Group. Our address is 2217 Stantonsburg Road, Greenville, North Carolina. I've appeared before you on a couple of different occasions during the rezoning and when we came to publicly apologize for the inadvertent tree clearing. Won't rehash that, but the response that you hear tonight is our attempt to rectify that situation. We recognize that it's under the microscope of many neighbors and council members and the public at large, so we appreciate the opportunity to talk just a few minutes about what we think is a solution that will enable us to help right the wrong that occurred on the site. The plan that you see before you has about 130 new trees that did not exist in the plan that was approved as part of the rezoning. And when we were assessed the initial fine, we voluntarily assessed a fine against ourselves, $100,000, made that public, and that money goes solely to improving the landscaping plan that we see here tonight. When we looked at the plan, we worked with Urban Design Partners who originally did the site design, and came up with a plan that not only the town's minimum criteria is 2 inches, two caliber inches, and the plan that you see before you tonight, as Mary Jo correctly pointed out, there's some on the front along Monroe Road that are 6 caliber trees that are 24 feet tall. Those trees are not easily installed, and so we can't do all 6 caliper trees. So we did a pretty good mix of 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, and 6-inch trees to help blend in the areas that were impacted by the inadvertent clearing. And we've gotten some questions that were brought to our attention. The question, of course, is how many did you take down, and are you replacing every single one of them? Unfortunately, we can't do that. There are spatial issues, there are clustering issues that would put stress on the individual trees that we installed. And so our objective here tonight is to seek approval from Town Commission that will allow us to move forward with the plan as proposed. And our primary takeaway that we'd like to leave tonight is that, you know, these will be installed, they'll be warranted. We'll be providing information to planning staff to confirm the cost of the expenditures for the additional trees. Excuse me. And as well, they'll be bonded for 3 years. So there was some question, as Mary Jo pointed out, we would like to move forward with this so that we can capture the optimal planting season within the next 45 to 60 days when it starts to cool down. But if any of these are impacted by goings on during the site work, they're warranted and they'll be bonded for 3 years. So what we're investing in will be effectively bonded for the next 3 years so that they're not installed and then have shock and die. So, but with that, I'll just close with saying once again we apologize for the inadvertent clearing. I hope that town commissioners feel like we have stepped up to the plate to try to fix this situation. We continue to work closely with neighbors as well as town staff, and that's where we'll leave it. But I'm available, and we also have the Maggie Watts that is with Urban Design Partners that can answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Okay. I do have a question for you. Mary Jo, can we shrink that down a little bit so I can use a pointer? There we go. That's good right there. These 2 trees right here are the 6-inch caliber trees. And I guess when I looked at the plan, I noticed that this area seems a little vacant. What kind of impact is there? I mean, when you put a 6-inch caliper tree in, that's a pretty big tree. And what kind of shock does it go through? I know you said 3 years of guarantee on it, but would you be better putting a tree that will grow larger, that's smaller in the beginning? If we did that, could we get more trees up in this area? I mean, I understand here why you wouldn't want those because of the road
Yes,
access.
sir.
But up here, it just seems like that would be a place where we could add in some more vegetation.
Yeah, so a couple of different things. Let me first respond to the early part of your question and the northern part as it's shown on this site. That's the fire access point, so that's why you don't see trees in that immediate area. So I would suggest we probably wouldn't want to do that for that life and safety issues.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Maggie if she can explain about the larger trees, but it's a delicate balance because we're trying to make everything right. We could have come back with a plan that was all 2-inch, 2 caliber trees. We didn't. We went all the way up to the larger ones. So we are taking, you're correct in that we are taking a risk in installing larger trees. We are, they are warranted, and we're going to put them in areas that there's a fountain area. That's kind of the front door of our community from a Monroe Road standpoint. And so we certainly could concede that point if it was the direction of the town commissioners to perhaps reduce the size of those and come up with maybe a 4-inch option. But that was our attempt to show that we're willing to invest the funds to put stuff that is as close to what was taken away as possible. We can't take pines that were up for decades, but Maggie, this is Maggie. She designed the landscaping plan. I'm gonna get her to talk to just a little bit about stress. And
Maggie, if you could state your name and address, please.
Sure. I'm Maggie Watts with Urban Design Partners, 1318 Central Avenue, Charlotte, 28205. So I think the question was mainly about the 6-inch trees, that because they're so large. It could be very likely that those themselves would have to come from a different source than the rest of those trees would come. Someone that specializes in transferring those trees and installing those trees and making sure they're taking every effort for their, to survive. So sometimes those are specific companies that mainly work with just larger trees. So I think that would be probably my best answer for you there.
Well, are you optimistic that those will thrive in that?
I am. I've seen
Okay.
larger trees installed and work, and there does have to be care and concern, absolutely, but I think the location chosen was not only more of a prominent location, but also one away from some of the lower entrance that will go in eventually. And it may be, too, that we could stage those to go in just to make sure it's the exact right time where they're not going to have much disturbance around them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Higdon.
Yes, I was curious as to why there wasn't a plan or front-on view of what this is going to look like. What are the size ranges, and it may be included in the minutia of the millions of notes that are on these plans, but what are the size ranges, height of these trees?
There's quite a bit of varying height. As we said, those large trees, may be around the 24-foot range. The 2-inch trees may be more the 8 to 10 to even 12, depending on the variety. The 4-inch trees will be probably more 12 to 14. And there's also some evergreen trees out there that won't be quite as tall at first, but they'll be all the way. They'll be full to the ground, so they'll kind of provide a more immediate screening while those others are filling in.
And also, do you know what percentage are non-native, approximately?
I can get you that number, absolutely, but we definitely stuck with the town's list and tried to go as much native as we could. There's a lot of oaks. I'd say primarily you're looking at oaks. There's a lot of tulip poplars out there as well. Okay. Mainly where we added, I think you mentioned crepe myrtles. The crepe myrtles that we have are more interior to the site. There's a lot of red buds, which are also natives, and so there's quite a bit out there. If I just had to throw a ballpark percentage, I'd say maybe 75%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Belton.
Thank you, Mayor. Will you please, as a point of clarification, confirm that, for the record, Urban Design Partners is a separate entity unrelated to Urban Architecture Group?
Yes, that's correct. They're unrelated.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did you come up with $100,000 and develop a landscape plan that would fit into that $100,000? Or did you develop a landscape plan and determine a cost for what would be a good replacement?
let me address the $100,000. That was completely arbitrary, and it was a factor, a multiple of what we knew that the maximum penalty would be at the municipal level, $50,000. So we doubled that fine on ourselves so that we effectively had a triple fine. But that was the intent. So, but at the end of the day, the directive that we gave Maggie and her team was, this is our front door. You know, we one of the very first things I remember was working with Ralph Ramso. It was his idea to do the meandering sidewalk that you see, not just a straight run.
Well, let me interrupt you and ask the question a different way. Did you tell her, make it look like a front door, you've got $100,000 to work with?
No.
Okay.
The $100,000 was known publicly. But
I realize it was known publicly, but I'm trying to figure out, is this the value of the cost associated with this? Is it $100,000?
It'll be more than $100,000. Yeah. And to further answer your question, so Maggie, their firm does not have access to the subcontractors. They'll be doing the install, so they don't have a way of knowing what our cost is on that. But we will be providing the documentation to confirm that we met or exceeded what we committed to.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Thank you. My question and points have already been covered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Query?
I don't have a question, but just my thoughts on what we have here. Looking at the trees that were taken down and the density and the tall, thin trees that were probably not going to survive anyhow, I think, to me, this looks like a plan that would even be better than leaving the trees, because I don't think many of the ones that were taken down would have survived storms and that, because they were so tall and so thin. And I think this is more fitting, in my opinion, to what I would like to see there.
Okay. All right. Ms. Hall, would you like to step to the podium?
Catherine Hall, 715 Swift Court. I appreciate the meandering sidewalks. I appreciate the investment in the variety of specimens. I regret that the community did not have more of an opportunity to participate in the design phase of this project. We were told by the town and by the developer that there would be a series of community meetings for us to weigh in on the design. I think the developer and the town put a lot of work into this, but the community didn't participate, as far as I know or was informed of, in the development of this. We were invited to a meeting prior to the planning board, as was mentioned. It was a drop-in meeting. There wasn't any presentation of options or rationale or thought about why we've chosen these specimens or how this plan came together. And I really feel like after the violation of the community trust from the tree violation, it would have been wonderful to rebuild that and have us be a part of developing this. I'm a layperson, and it was very difficult to go in with all the big, drawings and to absorb that in that meeting and be given a half-page piece of paper and say, write your comments on this and we'll take that to the public. So I feel like we participated in 2 years in good faith to try to keep the buffer, and that was violated. Then I feel like we were told we'd be a part of developing this plan, and that didn't happen until the last minute. And I just urge the town and the developer at this point to get this right in the long run, to stay committed to when these trees die, to make sure that they are replanted. And another point, while I have the podium, is that we need to make sure that the Roseland commitment is totally followed. I know that this has been mentioned, and there's a commitment that's been made, but we've seen the commitments not followed through on different sides in the past. And I really want to reiterate the importance of maintaining the commitment to the Roseland restoration and making sure that that is right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I'm going to take some liberty here, if the board doesn't mind, to ask Debbie Foster a question. Is that okay? Sure. Debbie, on the, just again, this is from a layman's perspective, how long can a tree survive or appear to survive and then suddenly die when it's planted? I mean, we're hearing a 3-year guarantee, but is that enough?
My question in response to that,
Maybe you could come up here and speak. I'm sorry. I will say Debbie Foster is our chair of our Appearance and Tree Board. So.
I'll be a citizen tonight. How's that?
Okay.
So my question to the developer is, will there be irrigation systems all the way around the perimeter of this property?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is it programmable, I presume?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the problem with the question you ask is trees die from the inside out. So it's very difficult at times to find out that they're dying. Like the trees in front of Matthews Elementary School, they're so massive. I know that Ralph keeps a really sharp eye on those because they could potentially start to decay, and we're not going to know until they're pretty far gone. There was one taken off down on McKee Road at a little white farmhouse because it was actually dangerous to the public. So it's hard to know. Having said that, if it's properly installed, okay, and there's not a lot of disturbance to the roots going on, and it's irrigated properly, then I would think that we would see whether or not it's going to survive in the 3-year time period. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
And I will tell you, I had a chance to look at this tonight. One, I find the design very difficult because it's in tiny print. But I did see a nice variety of plants chosen here. There are a lot of oaks that have been chosen. The dogwoods and the red buds were nice plants. Wasn't thrilled with the knockout roses and the crepe myrtles. That's my personal opinion, though. But there were no invasive plants, exotic invasive plants, because those have been removed from the town list. But they did a good job, I think, providing a variety of different types of plants, and quite a few of them are fast-growing plants. So it's my hope that all the neighbors will start to see some fill-in fairly quickly from this.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Would the petitioner maybe ask you another question, if you could come up again? I would feel more comfortable, I mean, again, I'm a layman, I don't know what happens with these things, but I feel more comfortable with a 5-year guarantee than a 3-year on this.
Give me 1 second on that.
Okay.
Because the 3 years is a municipal requirement.
Okay.
And in a lot of instances, the standard warranty on landscaping is a year. So we're going 2 years beyond what we're typically used to.
I would say this isn't a typical situation.
Granted, yes, sir.
May I address that?
Yes.
Okay, so because this is a zoning decision for the board, which is an agreement between the board and the developer, you can go above and beyond the 3-year requirement that is in our ordinance. They would have to make sure they bonded those trees for 5 years. And so that would have to be noted also in the bond, that this would be an unusual step instead of the 3-year bonding that is required.
Okay.
I feel like we've responded to this pretty proactively, and if that is something, and it sounds like it is, if it's a directive, then we'll work it out.
Okay.
So I can commit on record that we'll bond it per staff's direction.
For 5 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Higdon.
I heard Debbie mention knockout roses, and Mr. Mills, I don't know if you're aware that the town just went to great expense to remove thousands of, well, it seems like thousands, hundreds anyway, of knockout roses due to rosette disease, I believe. So please don't plant those.
I can also say there's only a handful of those up in a top right corner, if you will, but we can certainly replace them with something else.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was almost all the roses in town had rosette disease, and we had to take them out and burn them, and it was very difficult to get rid of them.
We'll replace them.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this particular administrative amendment? Okay. So at this particular point, we can make a decision on this. Do we have a motion on this particular item? Mr. Melton.
Based on the comments about the perceived lack of public input and Debbie being the chair or citizen of our Tree and Appearance Board, only having a few minutes to look at this, I'd like to motion that we defer this or any action on this item until our next meeting on Monday, July 22nd, to give folks at least a week and a half to take a look at it, provide their input.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. A question I would ask Mr. Melton is how would we propose to ensure the public has more input? Are we going to ask the proximity group to ensure that there is another public meeting, or how do you want to do that?
Well, at least like there to be an opportunity for there to be a public meeting. It sounds as if the public had a perception that there would be. There hasn't been, and if we extend this for 2 weeks, I'd put this initially back for 2 items to happen. Proximity, go back to that group and allow for their input, and at least Debbie and Jill maybe provide their input during that time period as well.
Okay, well, we have the public meeting. You had that.
Have you had 2 public meetings?
You've had 1 public meeting, correct?
That's correct.
What detailed information was at that meeting?
The plan that had all of the different species and the layout and design.
So it's the same thing we're looking at here?
Yeah, and, you know, you want to?
There was some comments from Ralph. The first plan did not include all of the fill-in. Up at the top, right, Ralph requested that there be more fill-in on that side towards City Barbecue. And so the plan that was presented to the public has been filled in since then.
So, look, as a point of clarification, you had an advertised public meeting to present this design, less those fill-ins.
We did direct notice. The meeting that we had was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the meeting that we hosted was voluntary. It was not required. And we can have.
What necessitated the meeting is a little significance to me. It's a yes or no question. Did you have an advertised public meeting to review this design?
No, it is not required.
Okay. You're not going to answer my question, so I'll.
You can ask it again. We did not. We sent.
Did you have a public meeting?
In your packet, there's a list of everybody that was notified that were sent notifications.
Okay.
Okay. It was. I don't believe it was advertised because it was not a public recognized meeting. It was not a required meeting. It was us notifying the neighbors to come take a look at the plan.
Okay. Fair enough.
And we just for the record, from our standpoint, the longer we go to put this in, the better off it is, because we're willing. We met with staff and we thought that it was a good idea to put it in at the optimal time. If we miss that window, we'll just do it at the end of construction. So our goal was, when we started looking at the planning commission schedule, the town commission schedule, that this was the path that gave us the ability to hit that, optimal window. And so Ms. Hall is correct. We did say we'd have input from them. And I'm sure that it would be ideal to have multiple meetings. When we were going through the rezoning, I think we had 9 voluntary meetings. We're not opposed to meeting with neighbors. We've proven that to date. I will say this: we're fine delaying for another 2 weeks. I'm not quite sure what we accomplished there, but we're certainly willing to do it.
Mr. Higgins. Yeah, I don't think a 2-week delay is going to detrimentally affect installation. It's only 2 weeks, and it would give the opportunity for Appearance and Tree Board to look at the plans and have any final comments. I do think what was presented tonight is a little bit difficult, especially for a layman to understand, so maybe some more explanation. And at that meeting, perhaps Ms. Hall and some of her folks could meet as well. Just one more meeting,
Yes,
wrap
sir.
it up. I applaud the effort that you've made and the monies that you've spent. But this is just, this is a very special situation. I think it would, put a bow on it and make sure everybody's been heard and there's no outstanding issues. So can we just delay for 2 weeks? That's all we're asking.
We'll be happy to agree to that.
Mr. Query?
Yes, and in my opinion, but not trying to hold you up time-wise, I feel like a commissioner's asked for a deferral, and I think that's appropriate for us to do that in lieu of the fact that supposedly each commissioner has the right to ask for a deferral one time, and I respect the fact that Commissioner Melton asked for one.
If I may,